My name's Lauren, and I have been struggling with chronic pain for the last almost 4 years now, every day for the last 4 years. And I have always been an artist and a writer and a creative and a storyteller. And I've always used my hands to make things, and I've always found my purpose and meaning in using my hands to paint or draw or write or make these wonderful, fantastical worlds. And for a while, I would just work through my pain and just make things worse for myself. And then there's a point where I realized that I couldn't do those things anymore, that I just had to give them up, and that I felt like I had to give up all of my dreams and all of my hopes and everything that I've been trying to work for. I tried to forget my stories, and I've tried to forget the joy of drawing or painting. And I'd hoped that maybe I could get a diagnosis or treatment and that I could have my hands back. But recently I've been learning that I can't wait for some tentative future that may not exist. It's time to just say screw it all and just start chasing those things that made me feel like myself. I don't need my hands. I want them, I like using them, but I realize that I still have my voice and I can still tell you my stories, so that's what I'm going to do. There's a little bit of planning, but these words haven't been written down, they haven't been practiced or rehearsed. They're just the story that I have to tell, and sit down, get cozy, because it's gonna be a long one. The summers in Halah ranged from these hot, humid, heavy days where stepping outside made you instantly start sweating, and the air was so heavy that it was hard to breathe and hard to move. And the other days were light and airy. There was a breeze, the sunshine warmed your skin, and it was nice and delightful. The winter among the mountains were always hard and harsh, bitter winds and tall snows, tall mounds of snow. So when summer and good weather finally came, the activity in the country was always much more active. Sure, there were a lot more people visiting parks and visiting monuments and being outside and having a great time, but there was also a lot more crime and a lot more protests and a lot more anger and activity that just caused trouble for the people who were in charge of the government and keeping everything running smoothly. So when this summer came around, Kiaan's parents sent him and his sister to a summer vacation home to keep them out of their hair and to keep them from distracting their parents from the duties that they needed to keep to. Kiaan was always a very curious person, and he always wanted to know what was going on, what his parents were doing, how they were keeping everything under control. He wanted to know about what was going wrong, and he wanted to know about ways that they could help, but it seemed like every idea he had 1,000 more problems, and it seemed like every idea had problems. So the solution was just to do nothing and keep things the way they were, because there was never going to be a perfect solution. And him trying to find that perfect solution sometimes rubbed people the wrong way. He was deemed an optimist, but naive and ignorant to the harsh and bitter realities of the world. His sister was a different kind of active. She was someone who was out in the world, always doing something, always making friends, always laughing or joking or causing a ruckus. She always had a lot of friends, so staying at the vacation home was a bit of more torture for her. She missed being away from activity and people in this vacation home. And it wasn't a bad vacation home. It was a beautiful cabin, large, and with all of these accommodations that they've grown used to in their palace. The vacation home was simple from the outside, but still larger and better off than most people in the city would find. It was based off of a large lake with a dock leading from the lake to the house. There were many rooms for all of the servants, all of the guards, and of course the kids. There were trees and grass and water and birds and nature, but they didn't really have access to the technology and the luxuries that they were used to back home, so spending time there was hard. Kiaan tried to spend his days talking to his guards and talking to the staff, but that only killed so much time. He would take his camera out to the lake and wander around the woods with his guards, taking pictures and trying to find the perfect light, but sometimes those scenes fell stale. And you can only take pictures of trees so many times. He missed the spontaneity and irregularity of the city. There was always someone new. There was always something going on. And even though the setting stayed the same, he never really went out much, there was still someone doing something new or activity going on that he could witness. It was boring there. It was boring. He was bored. And his sister Inaaya was not doing any better. She did her same workout routines, but she missed her friends, she missed showing off, she missed laughing and joking and showing off for them. On that particular day, Kiaan was in his room talking to his guards about some of the things that they were excited about being at this new vacation home. Well, it's not really a new vacation home. They've been there many times as children, but not so much as they had gotten older. And a lot of the guards weren't as familiar with it, being newer, not having been around at that time. They were excited about the lake and being able to do some fishing. They needed a boat to get out off the pier and actually catch some good fish, but it was still fun practice seeing just all of the intricacies of catching a fish. There were fountains and ponds in the city, but there weren't really any living fish, any catchable fish at least. There weren't any trees in the city, there was barely any grass. It was all glass and reflections. Buildings that rode high into the sky and lights that stayed on through the night. Every material had this reflective sheen showing you a mirror image, but of a world that's a little bit darker, a little bit grimmer, a little bit more mysterious. Or perhaps it was showing the world as it was, without all of the shiny flair and flashiness that we had grown accustomed to. Kiaan was roused from his daydreams when the door to his room opened and two kitchen staff waited in with a serving cart. Seems like it was lunchtime. He was snapped back to reality and listened more to what his guard was telling him about, but his focus was on the meal. He didn't realize how hungry he was until his stomach growled when the cart entered. He was hoping for some cool fruit to refreshen him from the humidity that was growing inside the room. The building was air-conditioned, but the light coming in from the window still warmed the place up uncomfortably. While he was daydreaming about whatever food might be in the serving trays. He caught a glint out of the corner of his eye and looked to see one of the kitchen staff pointing a gun at his chest. The guard was still chatting idly about some new fishing lures to catch whatever big creature was out in the lake waiting for him. And Kiaan could not take his eyes off the gun. In slow motion, he could see the trigger being pulled, but he couldn't move. Before he could even blink, the other waitstaff in the room moved between them and shoved the cart against the waitstaff holding the gun, pushing the person against the wall and causing the gun to fire. The kitchen staff took a bullet to their shoulder and fell, but by this time the guard had obviously heard the gun, heard what was going on, and was on his feet, charging, storming towards the person who had pulled their gun, pinning them to the ground, kicking their weapon away. The two of them struggle on the ground before the guard takes the false kitchen staff's head in his hand and knocks it against the floor, knocking them out. Kiaan's heart beat hard in his chest, still reeling from what happened, still unable to move, unable to process what had just happened. Someone had just made an attempt on his life. He wasn't anything worth targeting. He was just the head family's kid. He wasn't even the one who was gonna inherit any of the power. And then his thought turns to his older sister, Inaaya, where she was, what was going to happen to her. And then he remembered again that the other kitchen staff member who had pushed the cart and jumped between the two of them, who was lying on the floor, who was bleeding from the shoulder. Kiaan takes a breath and moves forward to check on them, see if they are okay, to see what he could do, if anything. He could stop the bleeding. He could do that, at least, probably. The staff member was laying on their stomach, short black hair covering their face. He could see the shiny stickiness on their uniform. The guard had finished tying up the attacker and came forward to the others. Kiaan and the staff both on the floor. The guard gingerly put a hand on the kitchen staff's shoulder. "Hey, are you okay? Are you awake?" The staff member mumbled. "That was a really brave thing you did. What's your name?" Niah, she said, moaning and straining to sit up. The guard put his other hand behind her back and helped her sit up. He looked at Kiaan, who was sitting still silent, still shocked, still feeling terribly out of his depth. The guard handed Kiaan a knife. "Take this and go cut a strip out of the curtains. We need to wrap up her shoulder quick before she loses any more blood." Kiaan nodded and quickly took to shredding the curtains, probably taking more than he needed, but he had no idea how much he needed, so he took all of it. There were really any curtains left by the time he was done, handing each strip across to the guard, who worked on bandaging up her shoulder. While he worked, they tried to figure out what they need to do. If there is one attacker, there's likely to be more. Someone that bold and strategic doesn't come alone. There had to be someone else, and Inaaya also had to be in trouble. There's a safe room on the east side of the house. If they could get there, they could lock themselves inside. They could keep Niah and Kiaan and Inaaya safe. And then the rest of the guards could go search and secure the rest of the vacation home, making sure that there was no one else who could harm them left. The guard questioned Niah about this kitchen staff member, where they're from, how long they had been working there, anything that this person had said to make what was going on clear, any hint of a plan. But Niah didn't know anything. They had started, they were new to the vacation home, but it wasn't her place to question any of the staff members. The attacker had seemed like a normal kitchen staff, but they kept to themselves. It didn't seem like there was a coalition of assailants conspiring in the kitchen. There wasn't any evidence of that, but she was so frustrated at not realizing, of not seeing that she had let dangerous people in. And it wasn't her fault. She was as fool as anyone else, but she should have known better. It was time to move. Kiaan and the guard both helped Niah up to her feet, and the guard led the way through the hall, checking every corner, checking every doorway as they slowly inched forward, slowly made their way across the vacation home towards the east side of the building. Kiaan's head was clearing up as they moved, getting the blood flowing again and being able to properly process what was happening. He called Inaaya, leaving a message for her, telling her what had happened if she didn't already know, and telling her where they were going. The guard also left a message to Inaaya's guards, hoping that they would see it or hear it if it wasn't already too late. The rooms and the halls of the vacation home that once seemed cozy and safe and far away from all the troubles of the city suddenly felt small and incredibly dangerous and violated in a way that he knew he would never be able to sleep easy here again. The guard moved quickly and confidently, stopping at each corner and pressing his back against the wall, aiming his gun down the corridor, making sure that there wasn't anyone else miling about. For someone who was just shot, Niah also moves slowly and confidently in between Kiaan and the guard. One arm hung limply at her side, but she seemed barely perturbed by the injury and the pain. Occasionally, a grimace would show on her face, or she'd take a sharp intake of breath, but that was the only indication that she had been experiencing anything other than slight discomfort. They had almost made it to the safe room when they heard voices and shouting. The guard crouches down and motions for Kiaan and Niah to do the same. The guard peeks his head around tentatively around the corner, watching. He holds up a hand for Kiaan and Niah to stay, and he slowly gets up and creeps around the corner. Kiaan and Niah wait in painful silence, waiting, agonizing for someone to come back around the corner, whether it was their guard or some mysterious assailant. His heartbeat thundered in his chest so loud that he felt like the whole building could hear. The shouts got louder. There were gunshots. There was a pained yell. They hear footsteps thundering back towards him, fast running, injured, limping. And Niah stands up, squaring herself against the corner, preparing for something to happen, and Kiaan stumbles up, trying to follow suit, trying to be brave instead of watching this injured person put herself in danger for him again. The friendly face of his guard rounds the corner, but his face is red, he's out of breath. He's holding his arm, and Kiaan can see blood streaming from his leg. The guard is out of breath. We need the safe room. They're covering it. We can't go there. I don't know where your sister is, Kiaan, but we can't go back there. We need to find somewhere else. We need to find somewhere else to go to. We need to find somewhere that we can lock or barricade up, preferably with reinforced walls so they can't shoot down. Niah spoke with a calculating look. She was running options through her head and ruling things out and narrowing down her list. You could see the thoughts processing in her head as if she had years of experience of being a practice guard. Niah looked to the guard. We can use the kitchen. There's plenty of things to barricade, and the walls are reinforced against fires. This may start there. It might be our best chance. The guard nodded, gritted his teeth, and they all followed Niah, who led the way back to the kitchen. Kiaan supported his guard, who was badly injured and could barely walk. They moved as quick as they could, hearing voices behind them, never really sure where they were coming from. There wasn't as much time to make sure where they were going was even clear, but Niah walked quickly and confidently. They turn a corner and rush for the open kitchen door, but as soon as they make it there, they see 4 staff members on the ground, their arms over their heads, fear and concern in their eyes as they saw Kiaan's group stumble into them, and they see a woman standing above them, a gun in her hand, her face covered with a mask. Before this woman could even turn around to aim her gun at the group, Niah had pulled the gun from the guard's holster and fired a single assured shot into the side of the woman. She fell, her gun flew and scattered to the ground, and the people on the floor, the kitchen staff on the floor, quickly grabbed it, moved it away from her. Niah rushed into the room and shut the door as soon as Kiaan and his guard made it inside. The kitchen staff were busy tying up the woman, and they were moving pantries and ovens in front of the door to barricade it against anyone who would try to get back in. Niah motions for them all to huddle behind a counter, waiting, listening for whatever attack is going to come at the doors, waiting for them to burst open, for people to stream in, attacking, waiting for reinforcements to come to help them, waiting for something to happen. Kiaan could see Niah taking slow, practice breaths, her eyes closed, listening, trying to steady her heartbeat, trying to breathe, trying to calm down. But he could see that her hands were still shaking, the gun sitting in her lap still. And leaning against him, Kiaan could feel the guard losing consciousness. He could feel the guard swaying and jolting in and out of consciousness. And he realized that blood was still streaming down the guard's arm. Does anyone have any cloth I can use to wrap his wounds? Kiaan asked to the kitchen staff. They took a knife off the counter and started cutting up and ripping off the hem of their pants and the sleeves of their shirts, handing the strips to Kiaan, who did his best to mimic what he saw the guard do to Niah, trying to wrap it tightly and confidently and trying not to put too much pressure on it, but not too little, and just trying not to make things worse. Niah watched him silently, and it was hard to gauge whether her look was of judgment or approval, but she said nothing. The kitchen staff began whispering about the people who had betrayed them, speculating about where they came from, who they were, why, what they were trying to do. But no one had any idea. No one had any inkling of what was being planned. They had no idea how many there were, either. From the staff that was missing, there was likely 6 people in total. And Kiaan and his crew managed to take down 2 of them, so that meant there were only 4 left. But in the vacation home, there weren't that many guards. And they were even down a few because they had sent a few home just to visit with their families on a temporary vacation from the vacation home. These assailants had definitely done their homework about when the best time to attack would be and when they would be most vulnerable, but it was still unclear what their goal even was. Then gunshots shooting at the door, ricocheting off the metal. Because it was a kitchen, the doors didn't lock. They were just heavy to be fire doors to keep fire inside, but it wasn't meant for keeping shooters out. So then they started ramming the doors, and they could see the pantry and the oven moving bit by bit, slowly opening the door to the attackers. The kitchen staff huddle up against each other, and Kiaan tries to make himself small, trying to make himself unseen and a smaller, less vulnerable target, but he still felt weak and helpless. But he heard Niah next to him let out a heavy exhale and then stand up with the gun in her arm aimed at the door. He heard her fire 1 shot, then 2, before the clamor of the door opening and 2 more shots raining into the room at them. Niah ducks back down under their cover, her breath heavy and quick again. Kiaan hazarded a peek between the cabinets, through the thin crack that he could see. He just saw 2 sets of legs left. They could do this, and Niah could do this, right? He hears her take a heavy breath again, and stand up and fire once, and then click, 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 out of ammo. She lets out a groan and hides back behind the table, throws the gun aside, and then darts out from behind the cover, charging at the last remaining attacker. She slams her good shoulder into him, and the attacker stumbles, his arm reeling, the gun firing a haphazard shot into nothing. She sweep kicks his leg and he stumbles, he falls to the ground. The gun scatters across the floor. Kiaan, the gun! Niah shouts, trying to keep the attacker from moving forward, trying to keep him from getting the gun back and killing all of them. Kiaan scrambles, he reaches, he misses, and pushes the gun further away. But he manages to focus, manages to grab it as the attacker grabs his wrist. But Kiaan punches the man's face as Niah kicks him in the stomach and the man passes out. Kiaan's breathing is panicked, frenzied. He's looking around, seeing of what other unknown horror or terror or attacker might be hiding in the shadows, but there's nothing. It's silent. It's still. Slowly, the kitchen staff get up from their hiding place and look around tentatively. Niah's clutching her injured shoulder. He can see blood bleeding through the bandages again. Her breathing's quick, and you can see her swaying on her feet as she leans up against a wall for balance to try to steady herself, to try to keep her passing out. Leaning against the wall, she lets her knees fold, sitting on the floor, resting her eyes, holding her shoulder. Kiaan lets the kitchen staff tend to her, look after her wounds. He checks on his guard and sees the man's communicator lighting up with messages, lighting up with the incoming call. He grabs it and answers it, making sure still that his guard was okay, or would be okay. Hi, hello, this is Kiaan. Kiaan? The voice on the other side of the communicator asked. What happened to Harish? Is he okay? What are you okay? What's going on? And I have Inaaya here in the safe room. Everyone's okay here, but we could hear people outside. We could hear fighting. What happened? Kiaan let out a relieved exhale, knowing that his sister was safe. She was okay. Harish is injured. He was shot in the leg and the arm, and I think he's okay. I think he's going to be okay. I've bandaged him up as much as I could. I think we took down all of the attackers. I don't think there's anyone left. We're hiding in the kitchen. I have I have some of the kitchen staff with me. One of them is injured. I'm okay. I'm not hurt. The guard replied. Stay where you are. We're gonna come get you, okay? Stay on the line, Kiaan. And again, Kiaan felt relieved. The guard spoke again. We've already called in for backup from the city, though they should be here hopefully soon. And hopefully there isn't anyone else from whoever side that was coming to attack us. But I'm gonna come get you, and we're all gonna go to the safe room and hide out there until we get help, okay? The rest of the day moves quickly and almost surreally. They happen in almost vignettes, where one moment he's waiting in the kitchen watching the injured people, watching the kitchen staff. The next moment he's in the safe room hugging his sister, glad she's safe, glad she's okay. He absentmindedly tells her what happened, tells her of the kitchen staff, of all people, who was able to take out all of the attackers. In the next moment, there's an ambulance, and there's more guards, and they're at the hospital, and his parents are hugging him, and he's going back home. But he still can't stop thinking of that day, of how useless and helpless he felt, of his guard who was hurt trying to help him, and of the kitchen staff, of Niah, who somehow was a better guard than his own personal hired and trained guard. A few days go by before Kiaan resolves to visit Niah in the hospital, to just thank her, to check on her, to see how she's doing, make sure she's okay, and see if there's anything he could do to thank her. He's never had to be in a hospital before. Most times he was sick or his sister was sick, they were able to bring the doctors to them. There was no need to be in the sterile, almost hostile hospital where it always felt like he was in the way of something. It always felt like he was some dirty outsider bringing contaminants into this clean, white, pristine place. He followed the directions the nurse gave him and stood outside Niah's door. He wasn't really sure what to say. He had never been that good with people or talking, and he especially didn't know how to fully express his gratitude. He brought flowers. That seemed like the kind of thing one gives to someone recovering in the hospital, but it also seemed trite and small. And she didn't really seem like a flower person, but he also knew nothing about her, except of her bravery and decisiveness. He took a deep breath and opened the door. She had been laying on her back reading and turned to face him, surprised to see him there. Hi, it's Kiaan. You know me. I just wanted to see how you're doing, and I brought you flowers, to, get well and kind of cheer up the gloomy atmosphere. Not that you're gloomy. Her eyes lighten and she smiles. I appreciate it. I didn't think I had anyone who's gonna visit me here. Oh, you don't have parents in the city? Kiaan asked, trying to find a place to put the flowers he brought. Nah, Niah said, shaking her head. They're from out of town. It's kind of a hike, and I don't really talk to them anymore. Kiaan dumps out a glass of cotton balls and sticks the flowers in the bowl. Cotton balls didn't need a bowl anyway. I'm sorry that you don't hear much from your parents, he said. But, how are you doing? How's the shoulder? She let out a heavy sigh. It's mostly fine. They want to keep me here to make sure it doesn't get infected, or I don't know. I really can't wait to get out of here. Hey, don't worry about it. Kiaan tried to reassure. The hospital is gonna take great care of you. You don't have anything to worry about. Like I know some of the doctors here and they're really good. I can make sure that you get one of them. Niah shook her head. Thank you, but it's not the hospital or the doctors. It just reminds me of another incident. She turns the right side of her face to him, and somehow, for the first time, you see the scars down the right side of her face and sees it disappear under the collar of her hospital gown. In the panic of the attack and the battle, he hadn't even looked at her face somehow. I'm sorry. That's probably a really bad accident, huh? Kiaan asked. It was a bad day, she said, and decided to drop the topic. Why don't you join my guard? Kiaan suggested, the idea surprising him as he said it. But then he actually thought about it and realized that's exactly what she should do. He continued explaining his idea. You were so level-headed and decisive during that attack. You behaved better than my own guard somehow, and you're an untrained kitchen staff, or at least I thought you were untrained, but it seems like you've had some training. But you could go to the guard training. It takes a little while. But there are better benefits and better pay and better vacation time, and we can also hang out and get to know you better if you want. It just uh, think about it. I guess there's a slot for you if you want it. I'll have them send the application, and like you would still have to get through orientation, and you would still have to like make sure that you qualify, but I think you'd be good at it. And I'd like to have you be a part of the team. But no pressure. If you want to stay as a kitchen staff, or if you want to do something else, totally your choice. Just Naya gave a thoughtful look and a small smile. Her eyes narrowed in contemplation. I will think about it. Thank you. And soon. So that is chapter 1 of my story. Thank you so much for listening. I have so many big plans for the story, so many people for you to meet, and it's really exciting to be able to tell this. And it's really exciting to find ways to be creative and tell stories without having to use my hands. We'll see where this goes, but for now, I will work on chapter 2. Thanks.